Our whole thing is velocity. So everything that we do is centered around how do we move the vehicle from owner A to owner B, from point A to point B. And we're automating as much of this process as we possibly can, which is possible because it's a very data-driven process, thanks to software-defined EVs being inherently connected vehicles. That said, by the time a truck shows up to pick up that vehicle after we become the owner, we've already found the dealer that will be the next owner. We generally sell them out of our inventory in about 48 hours or so.
Well, folks, Diana can't be here with us today, but I'm excited to bring you another tech entrepreneur in the auto retail space for this episode of Auto Titans, Jimmy Douglas from Plug. Jimmy, welcome to Auto Titans.
My brother, it's always good to be with you here.
Great to see you. For anyone out there who isn't familiar with Plug, it's a dealer-to-dealer online marketplace for used EVs. Do I have that right?
Yeah, pretty much. We are the EV marketplace at this point. We're the only online marketplace that focuses explicitly on electric vehicles, and we sell 100% of the cars to licensed dealers across the country. There's about 700 in total now that have signed up as a demand-side dealer. And to date, we've sold just over $120 million worth of EVs in our wholesale auction.
When we first met, when you were just launching Plug, there was a statistic, and correct me if I have it a little off, but they're like 10% of the dealerships sold 90% of the used EVs.
Yeah.
Essentially, the idea was, most dealerships didn't have an EV owner on their sales staff, so they couldn't answer customers' questions, so they couldn't sell them cars. But Plug stepped in to get the used EVs off the lots of dealerships that couldn't sell them and into the inventory of those that could. So here's my question, two parts really. Are used EV sales still as concentrated as they were then? And how has your business changed as that marketplace has evolved?
It's not quite as bad as it was. So here's what's going on now. You've got 3 nationwide retailers that collectively own 16% of all of the used EV sales. Pretty easy to guess who they are. And that is as much as the next 225 rooftops combined. Basically, 225 dealers plus 3 big nationwides owning about a third of the market. Those EV expert dealers in particular sell the cars about twice as fast as an average dealer that might have 1 or 2 used EVs here or there. They sell them in about 29 days compared to 59 days. And they sell them for more money, about a 5% uplift or so. In terms of the evolution of our business model, we continue to source some vehicles from dealers, but honestly, Jamie, the majority of the vehicles we source now are directly from consumers. And that's what's getting dealers in our auction so excited, because these are cars that were otherwise not going to end up at a wholesale auction. They're coming directly out of consumers' driveways. They're higher quality, and we get access to them because we are the best in the world at evaluating EVs for their condition and their capability and ultimately how to properly price them. So we compete for those vehicles with other nationwide buyers, but our values are generally more accurate, meaning the vehicles that deserve to be offered higher amounts do, and then we win them.
How do you find those vehicles on the street? Is it like a Facebook marketplace or?
There's a few different ways we do this, but the vast majority of them are coming directly to us organically. So if you've ever popped open LinkedIn and wondered why my face keeps showing up, it's because we've gone pretty hard on social media and it's been very effective. We have carved out a bit of a thought leadership space for ourselves in the used EV market, and people come to us for used EV expertise, and consumers have been finding us and submitting for a cash offer on their vehicle directly on our website at plugmotors.com. 60% of the time, the cash offer is instantaneous, and the rest of the time, it takes us about 6 to 7 minutes.
Then do you actually buy the cars? Do you have them in inventory, or do you just ship them immediately to a dealer customer?
Our whole thing is velocity. So everything that we do is centered around how do we move the vehicle from owner A to owner B, from point A to point B. And we're automating as much of this process as we possibly can, which is possible because it's a very data-driven process, thanks to software-defined EVs being inherently connected vehicles. That said, by the time a truck shows up to pick up that vehicle after we become the owner, we've already found the dealer that will be the next owner. We generally sell them out of our inventory in about 48 hours or so.
Wow, that's really remarkable. Okay, I want to get more into your operations in a little bit, but first I want to get back to your origin story. Like Diana, you started out as a young adult working in a dealership. What
Yeah.
was your experience like?
Honestly, working at a dealership is what saved my life to some extent. I moved out of my parents' house when I was 16. I had a sales job at the mall on straight commission, selling vacuums at Sears for a while, which actually did wonders in the early 2000s. But in pursuit of going to college, I found myself working full time in the service drive at a Volkswagen store in Gladstone, Oregon. Just a lot attendant to begin with. But within 6 months, they promoted me to a full time service advisor in evenings and weekends. And that is a heck of a job for a 17-year-old, especially in the early 2000s when Volkswagens were just dropping window regulators and mass airflow sensors like it was going out of style. And that was my introduction into the business.
So, how did you got from there to Tesla? How did that happen?
Yeah, a lot of time went by in between. I left the dealership
Okay.
when I graduated college when I was 22, jumped into a traditional technology software sales career for the majority of my 30s. And after moving to San Francisco and having a little bit of time off to reset, I decided to throw myself at the most blazing fire humanly possible for my own personal development. Blazing fire is a pretty good descriptor of Tesla at the start of 2018 when we were just beginning
Mm.
journey of Model 3 production hell, and we were the most shorted company in the world, and our CEO was famously sleeping in the factory. So I took literally any job they would give me, and that ended up being on the engineering finance team focused on Model 3 bomb cost reduction so we could sell one for $35,000 without lighting money on fire. And it was the ultimate crash course in how to operate at multi-billion-dollar scale, where it feels like the majority of the world is rallying either for your success or your total failure and nothing in between.
Yeah, quite a cauldron to experience. So you started with, you said bomb cost reduction, bill of material, cost
Yep.
reduction, obviously trying to make that a super lean vehicle, but you ended up getting into used cars.
Technically, when I joined the company, it was through a rotational program under John McNeil's leadership when he was still there.
Mm.
So the idea was that we would do a few jobs before we find a permanent one, myself and a cohort of about 60 people that were brought in at the time. Once I landed in the used car team, I never really left. It was an extremely interesting business to me, having worked in used car retail at a dealership when I was really young, having owned 30 different cars before I turned 30, which is obviously the sign of a diagnosable problem. But more importantly, having some really interesting problems to solve because it was the largest used EV operation in the world. And none of our problems were remotely relatable to anybody else.
Well, and you had a real array, right? I would imagine like those sort of middle years for Tesla, a lot of Mercedes and a lot of Priuses. I would imagine kind of a bipolar set of trade-ins.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. The Honda Accord was a very frequent flyer in the trade-in program. Tesla's market appeal was extremely broad, and it's very true. You might get a $2,000 Accord or a $100,000 Porsche 911 and everything in between. But more importantly, we also supported the resale of used Teslas, both through our own vertically integrated retail program that spanned nationwide, as well as a wholesale program where we had a presence at a pretty significant number of traditional wholesale auctions.
There have been so many Tesla alums that have gone on to start their own businesses, high profile ones like JB Straubel with Redwood Materials and Jay Vijayan at Techion, but there's others as well. Is there a Tesla thing about that, or is it just a California thing? Why do you think there are so many of these? Or do they just stand out because, people with Tesla on their resume pop off the screen like, Ram trucks on the highway?
If you were at Tesla during that era, and if you were there for a long time, it was such an intense, world changing sprint. And it would be really difficult to move on from that into an environment of any lesser intensity or aspiration. For many people, myself included, really the only other option, other than working there for the remainder of our careers, was to take the biggest career swing possible, which is let's manifest a billion or trillion dollar outcome starting from absolute zero. And having lived through so many cycles inside of Tesla, accomplishing feats that we calculated to be either impossible or very close to impossible, but then figuring out how to do it enough times will really make you believe that you're capable of pretty much anything if you try.
So how did you get from Tesla, I know you used vehicles and then sales and service operations uh, to plug.
By the end of my tenure there, which was 5 years, I still had the used car P&L within my purview, but it was about 10% of my job, where the majority of my time was spent at the helm of sales and delivery operations for the core new car automotive business across North America. That said, I continued to have a great passion for the used car business. And what I really started seeing was that as we get deeper into this world of the software defined vehicle, where we're really just selling an autonomous battery powered asset on rails that were designed for used cars 80 years ago. There's actually a pretty big threat to longer term EV adoption if we can't have a healthy secondary market. And it was a consumer and dealer education component. There's financing, there's residual values, there's the velocity through which all this takes place. There's a bias for in person operations where telematics could probably be leveraged to speed things up. And I realized there's a whole ecosystem that needs to come out of this in order to be prepared for the next generation. And frankly, I had the feeling that nobody in the world was more qualified to solve this problem and nobody cared about it as much as I did. So at some point in time, I just decided I had no choice but to venture out on my own and make this my life's mission.
You got it off the ground. And then last winter, you had a successful fundraising. How's that changed the business? What's that allowed you to do?
Grow a lot faster. Yeah, the day after Christmas in 2025, we closed on $20 million Series A capital financing led by Lightspeed Venture Partners with participation from Galvanize and continued support from our past investors. Huge win for the team and very gratifying that we get to keep doing this and growing well into the year to start capitalizing on the moment we were building for. So when I started the company in 2023, the thought process was we need to be ready for 2026 because the Inflation Reduction Act hit. We started seeing EV leasing go to the moon because of the 45W credit loophole. And we knew that this moment would come where now we have 1.1 million lease returns hitting the market over the next 3 years. And this is our moment in time to the dealer population in properly adopting these assets so that they can do so highly profitably and ultimately bring positive consumer buying experiences and lead to more EV sales overall, new and used.
What I've seen of the models, as you said, referring to the 1.1 million EVs about to come off lease, it really was set to hit kind of in the second half of 2026, which I believe is where we are now. We're at the beginning of that now. Are you seeing that? Has the flood begun, or is it still kind of a trickle before it really breaks?
It's kind of a linear ramp. So there was 96,000 in the first half of this year. There will be 195,000 in the second half of this year. Used EVs are sort of in the right place at the right time right now, given that we have been periodically seeing the occasional $100 oil barrel. The used EV sales overall in the market were up 12% year over year in Q2, 120,000 units, but they've been selling faster than they did compared to the prior year. They were at 34 days of supply compared to 39, and faster than combustion vehicles very nominally the whole way through. Now, the question will then be, will that maintain as the volume doubles in the second half of the year? But what we saw happen in Q2 was the premium people were paying for used EVs actually started widening back up. It started at 3%. And then by the end of Q2, people were paying 10% more for used EVs than they were for used combustion vehicles. And that's going to slow down the sales pacing. But once we double supply, it'll start to normalize.
That widening premium, is that a reflection of the savings that, when gas prices are high, when oil's $100 a barrel, then people are like, I want to quit filling up my other used vehicle and replace it with something else?
Well, yeah, everything is just so expensive now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Housing, education, healthcare, auto loans, mortgages. People are really looking at their automobile purchase in a different light now, and more so in the context of the total cost of ownership. Very well documented that the total cost of ownership of a modern electric vehicle compared to the same vintage of combustion vehicle is going to be lower unless you're in some sort of supreme disadvantage in your energy costs, because it's not just the gas versus energy, it's also the ongoing maintenance and repair, of which EVs require very little.
I guess one of the things I'm trying to figure out, the differences and the similarities, through July is looking like it's going to be the best sales month in maybe years, certainly the best of the year. New vehicle demand has remained really resilient despite all the economic shocks. And I'm wondering if because there is a premium on used EVs, is the used EV buyer a little more economically, financially, more like a new vehicle buyer than a used vehicle buyer?
It's a mix. So on new EVs, that's definitely true, right? And there's something like a 12% premium on the cost of a new EV versus a new combustion vehicle. I think it's $56 versus $50,000 or something like that. Used EVs is way more mixed. When we had the $25,000 tax credit eligibility for $4,000 point of sale, what we saw was a lot of used EV buyers were not seeking out EVs. They were just seeking out the most affordable vehicle that they could get for their money. And in the market today, where the credits are gone, we continue to see a mix. Certainly, there's affluent buyers that are just capitalizing on the used EV market arbitrage because it feels great to pay 60% for an asset that's only 10% into its useful life after 3 years. On the other hand, however, the economic profile of the used EV buyer is ultimately what brings a lot of people into the EV market at all because it was an affordable option for them. So it really is a mixture now.
Can you talk a little about your marketing approach? I'm thinking back when we started this show, Diana, we were at NADA. Diana was joking. She was going to make a t-shirt that said, "I am the booth," because she wasn't renting floor space. She wasn't, building a meeting space there. But you kind of went the opposite. You had robots fighting cage matches on the floor of NADA.
We did.
What are you trying to accomplish? Are there still dealers that need to know that Plug is out there, or is it getting them to maybe think, hey, I really need to engage with this platform?
It's my belief that if you are building a business on the backs of car dealerships, then you need to be an active participant in this community. And NADA, of course, is the epicenter for that participation. But what were we going to do? Find me a single dealer at NADA that wanted to walk to Faraway Hall to talk to somebody about EVs. There's no way. But everybody likes violence. If we can make the violence battery powered and somehow tie it into what we're doing, then there's something to it. Instead of a booth, we had an octagon. It was a full-size octagon, and we had battery-powered, VR-controlled humanoid robots that were beating the absolute hell out of each other, controlled by dealers who were competing to win a fabulous belt that we handed out at the end. And for us, it was really a branding and awareness and publicity play. And we certainly signed up a bunch of dealers while we were there and some partnerships that will absolutely make that showcasing totally ROI positive. But honestly, Jamie, this should be fun. And what we learned from that experience was that what makes things fun for us and what's on brand for us when we're exhibiting at trade shows is two vectors. And we call it interactivity and absurdity. So going forward, if you ever see us at a conference, your evaluation should be that it was a highly interactive and absurd experience. And we've pulled a couple of other antics since then. We sponsored a bar at Used Vehicle Industry Summit, and we handed out, this was right when the Strait of Hormuz started closing, and we handed out sympathy cards that said that we were expressing our deepest condolences for your intensifying situationship with the gas pump. And inside of the card included a gift card for a gas station, up to $100 worth, actually. And depending on how lucky you are, maybe you got $100 at the pump or $25 at the pump. And at a more recent conference at NIADA, we said, what if we just give away a Tesla? So we did.
Yeah, those are both pretty absurd. I think, giving an EV seller giving away, cash cards for gasoline, not exactly on brand, but you were making a point.
We were just having fun. And trade shows are so expensive. It is outrageously easy to just light money on fire in ways that really benefits nobody. So if we're going to spend the money, we may as well make it extremely memorable, even if that memory is highly acute for a small, concentrated population of people.
It's finding the right target with the right message.
And we are good at that. One thing that's very easy for us is to set up systems that tell us who are the dealers across the country that are actively selling used EVs that are not already engaged with us. So if we are going to participate in a conference or an event and we can review who the dealers are that will be there, we can make a pretty immediate ROI-minded decision on whether or not it makes sense to make that investment based on the specific named accounts that we need to establish business with.
Well, this was certainly a fun conversation. You've found ways to invest and get an ROI, including an ROI of fun. I'm sure Diana will enjoy getting to see the conversation. I hope the audience does. I sure did. Jimmy Douglas, founder and CEO of Plug, thank you so much for joining us here at Auto Titans.
Always a pleasure, my friend.